What's up, guys? Welcome back. This is episode 27. I've got my buddy here, Dan Grove. Dan came to me, highly recommended from a bunch of our mutual friends in the Growth Co. And so we're here. We're going to talk about his journey into REI and how he's been doing it, especially maintaining with a very demanding career field. So Dan, why don't you kick us off? Kind of tell us who you are and how you got into REI and how you got here.
Yeah, so my main job, which I still do, is I'm a physician. I work in critical care. I'm an ICU doctor. I also do pulmonology. That's my main specialty. That's what I did all my training in. And I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I've lived here for 11 years. I was part of a private practice that got taken over sort of forcibly by one of these big sort of giant corporate health systems, which made my life, instead of being something where I was part of the practice where we made all the decisions. The physicians all made all the decisions. We all agreed on everything, to something where decisions were being 5, 6 levels above my head. And I mean, like on my work email, there's a hierarchy chart, right? Like, I don't know, like a lot of, like, on my Microsoft Outlook, right? And it says who I report to and who that person reports to and who like, where it used to be, I didn't report to anybody. I was part of I reported to the practice. Like, we all worked together. That was who I reported to. And then all of a sudden I reported to 3, 4, 5 layers. So I got really nervous because I didn't like the feeling of having my whole life and future and every career in the hands of people who I don't see or know, really. I mean, they come by every once in a while to say hello, but they're not interested in that. I mean, they're not bad people. They're good people. It's not a bad health system. It's just their priorities and their goals are not the same as mine, personally or professionally. And I mean, sometimes they overlap. Sometimes we are on the same path and it's great. But at any moment, you can get a new vice president, a new something, a CEO, and they decide, listen, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm stuck, right? Just like they came in and took us over against our will, they can do that at any time. So I said, you know, I think I need to have some sort of, I guess, backup plan so that I could have some more control of my future. I also was, I had money saved. Like, I'm not I make a decent living, but I don't spend a lot of money. Like, I drive a Hyundai, right? Like, I have a minivan. Like,
Yeah.
I don't go on vacations. I'm not a things kind of guy, right? And so I saved a lot of money over the last 20 years, and and I had it in these index funds, right? And I thought, well, not only does a healthcare system control my job and my future, but I have some sort of big financial institution, big bank, or whatever you want to call it, who's deciding what to do with my money. So I'm sitting here, like, in my life, I'm like, I got no say in anything. I have very little say in anything. And I'm just sort of floating at the whim of some sort of soulless corporate entity. Look, so I wanted to try to take back control of my life, my future. I'd had an experience in investing back in 2010. This was at the end of my training. So at that time, I was sort of finishing up training, moving on to the next stage of my life. I had 3 small children. I was not really interested in spending a lot of time in education, but I had a friend who was into real estate, and he's like, "You got to do it. You got to do it." And he helped me get into it. I got 2 houses in Atlanta. That's where I trained. And at that time, you want to, like, I still kick myself. You could buy a house for $35,000 in Atlanta at that time. Right? The
Yeah.
crash was It was right after the crash. But I was like, I don't know how to manage this. I didn't know how to deal with tenants. I didn't know anything. So I just said, okay, like, I just sold them, and I made money on it. But when I look at what the values of those houses would be right now, it makes me. So that was the other thing that's pushing me to. So I said, I got to get into real estate, but this time I'm going to do it right. I got education. I read books. I did Bigger Pockets, and then I heard Pace Morby on a podcast, and I signed up for the Sub 2 mentorship, and I took out a home equity loan, and I used my savings, and I started acquiring properties with creative finance. Initially without creative finance, just regular traditional, and then creative finance. And then I ran out of that money. I mean, I ran out of most of it. I have enough just for emergencies, but I then had to figure out, okay, so what do I do next, right?
Yeah.
Then I started, I got coaching, Jesse Stanton. I got coaching with him, and I started now trying to work with connecting with wholesalers and connecting with private lenders and connectors and capital, whoever, and trying to bring together those two to acquire more assets. And that started really, I was able to hire somebody who is helping me manage all this. And now we're trying to build a portfolio from there, single family homes right now. We're focusing mostly right now on co-living properties.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of the strategy now, to build from there. I'm still working full time, but I don't want to stop my job. I love my job. Do it the way I want it, as much as I want it, for as long as I want to. That's my goal. And I also have 5 kids, so to have something that they can maybe get into as they get older, or if not, they have some sort of legacy for them. That's my story in like what, 3 minutes. My life seemed so much more interesting as it was happening.
I'm sure it did when you're
Isn't it
putting it
sad
all
you
on
can summarize
fire.
your whole, like, I just summarized 10 years in like 4.5 minutes. Wow, man.
Well, to be
Other
fair,
things happen, but I don't want to bore people.
off recording, I pretty much summarized to you my entire professional
Yeah.
career from 19 to I'll be 32 next month.
Right.
I mean, that's not even, that's what, 12 years, 13 years? Like, that's not a lot of time. I mean, it's a lot of time, but it's not a lot of time to summarize all that. And I'm sure, like,
Right.
it was way more whimsical and way more fun when you were in it.
Sometimes.
Don't worry, I'm sure that's probably the reason why we all feel like we're losing our hair and we're growing
First of
crazy.
all, this is what medicine does to you, right?
I was gonna say
Less hair and worse vision.
that's what
More
business
wisdom, a lot more wisdom.
that's what business does too. I found a couple of grays like up in here over the
Oh
last
yeah, for
couple weeks.
sure.
I'm like,
Listen, the
man,
hair didn't fall out; it just migrated places.
oh yeah, just it
Coming
moved.
out. This is what happens when you approach 50. I'm 47, so I'm approaching 50. This is what happens. The
So
hair
talk
gives up. They just quit.
talk to us about co-living. What do you like about that exit strategy? What kind of problems are you hoping to solve with that?
So I'm okay. So there's a couple things I love about co-living, and thank you, Sharon. Yes, uh, bald is sexy. I could just shave it, but everybody asks me, should I just shave it all the way? But I feel like I owe the remaining few hairs. I feel like I owe them for sticking with it. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to. They've stuck with me when everyone else abandoned me. Right? All the other
They're
hairs
committed to
abandoned me.
you.
They
Yeah.
stuck around. I feel like it's not right just to shave them off. You know what I mean? So that's my thought. I don't know, but so I love co-living because for a lot of reasons. One is that there is a affordability housing crisis in this country, and it's not. It's a very simple problem. It's a problem of supply and demand. There is not enough supply. There's not enough housing. Right. I'm not an economist, but if you look around, it's like it has. I'm sure there's something like this big of a problem has multiple causes. There was a long period of time where they weren't making any houses and whatever. So there's a problem of not enough houses. So when you have not enough houses, it raises the rents for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And now it seems like, like it's the plague, avoid reading, talking, or thinking about politics. Okay. It just makes me crazy. But it seems
Fair.
like, and this is not a political commentary, it seems like most governments, red, blue state, whatever, they want to do everything in their power to make housing more affordable, except for build more housing or make it easier to build more housing. Right. And so it doesn't seem like it's going to get better, right, anytime soon. And even if they started building houses right now, supply decreased, right? So not only has supply decreased, but rent rates have gone up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Everything's going up. The cost of building is going up too, which is not helping with the affordability issues.
Right. So supply has gone down. So that driving rental rates up, but also the rent rates themselves has gone up. Housing prices have gone up, right? And so it makes it so there's a whole population of people. Well, there's sort of like, it's funny, co-living is sort of, I think of it as two categories. One is as an affordable housing solution, because what it does is allows you to create more housing units essentially without building more housing. Right? Instead of building 5 more, like an apartment building, right? Or a 5-unit apartment building or a 6-unit apartment building, I can take a house that would be a single family house and now it's a 6-unit. It houses 6 people, right? And so there's a lot of people, right? There's like people who have good jobs, right? They're single, they can't afford these studio apartments or a one-bedroom apartment, but they could afford a room. They make a solid income, steady income. There's another group of people who maybe they could afford a studio or a one-bedroom apartment, but they don't want to sign a lease because maybe they have a transient work. Like maybe they're in town on a construction project, they're laying fiber for Verizon, whatever. Or maybe maybe they have seasonal work or something like that. So they don't want to commit to a year-long lease, right? Or maybe they have credit issues and they can't. So it's right. So all this group of people that what are they going to do, right? They're in a situation where they have two options. They either they live on the street or they have to live way outside of town where it's less expensive. But then they got to spend 2 hours on public transportation, right? Trying to get to work, which just is a huge strain. So co-living is an opportunity for these folks to have a place to live, right?
Well, I think
And
the beautiful thing about co-living too is it solves both the problem for the investor as well as for
right,
tenants, right? Because you and I were kind of talking about financing a little bit before this, and with interest rates being as high as they are, most properties are not cash flowing long term, which
right,
means you do have to get creative. You do have to get a little bit more innovative with how you're going to structure your income. And, that property that probably would rent for 1850 fair market value, you know, I mean, yeah, that's great, but sometimes I won't even cash flow under Section 8.
right.
So it's like, well, what do you do? Well, if you turn it into individualized rooms, which I've lived in co-living before, like when I lived in a college town,
Yeah,
it was student housing, and I paid 569 a month for a bedroom that I shared with one other person in a townhome, and it was fine.
yeah.
You
Yes,
know,
I always got roommates, but like some people that's not possible. Like it was always in school, so I knew I was going to be there for at least, I knew exactly that I was going to be able to sign a year lease because I knew I was going to be there, but not everybody's able to do that. And so, right. So it solves a problem for me because it brings in more revenue. Um, and it allows me to sort of provide more housing. There's actually a second group of people that do co-living, which is like a new thing. There's a group of young folks um that they are incapable of committing to anything. They don't want to commit to a job, they don't want to commit to a house, they don't want to commit to a city. So what they do is they're like nomads, right? They move to a city and they take a job, but they don't want to commit to anything because they don't know if they'll like it. So they don't want to like sign a lease or they don't want to find roommates and stuff like that. So there are actually a lot of high end co-living houses, right? These are a lot of them were Airbnbs. Some of them like, I'm using a co-living manager in a house I just closed on in Denver. He has some houses that have indoor basketball courts, right? And like that were super high end Airbnbs. And he's renting them by the room to these sort of young professionals, single people don't want to commit to a city because they never know. And they don't want to commit to a house. They don't want to find roommates. So they rent a room and it's more like it's a higher end. So they're paying $1,500 a month for their room, but they also get like a social structure. They have, these houses are much more social. And so, it's like it's that's like a different sort of subset for co-living. And so I think it's great, right? I mean, it just is great. If you and I think if you find the right managers, the right operators, I think you can make it work in most places. So for me personally, I like having as many exit strategies in the toolbox as possible. Like my goal is to have as many possible deals with as many possible exit strategies so that I have the highest likelihood of finding something that works and that works well.
yeah, I love that. Like I said, the co-living solves so many different problems for a lot of people, and I think even just group homes in general is going to be the way of the future because as a physician, right, there's a lot of people that need in-house care, but in-home care is very expensive. So
Right.
maybe I have friends that are in our communities and sub two and whatnot, that's what they're looking at is like, what if we were to help out like disabled veterans or the IDD community or
Right.
anybody that has any level of deficiency or disability.
Residential assisted living, right? If you can find an operator for that, like, there's memory care homes, there's just regular assisted living homes. There's going to be a major shortage of, you know, of assisted living facilities. There's a lot of old people, right? And, listen, I'm not a scientist, but I'm guessing they're going to continue to get older, right? So, that's going to be an issue, right? And they got to live somewhere. And, so when, you know, if you have a choice of maybe your parents who are they need high needs living in your basement, and then you have to either find a way to get off work or pay for nursing, or you find a facility, then you're going to choose a facility. But if they're not available, then it's a problem.
Yeah, Sharon also said, she said, I do MTR, STR co-living strategy, 9 months to grad students, rent by the room, then
Right.
3 months vacation, which seems to work really well where she's at because she's in like the DMV area. So there's always a
Oh,
lot of
yeah, I'm in
traffic.
Baltimore. Shout out to DMV. Right. I'm the M. Um, and then yeah, and like a lot of people will do that, like an MTR STR model in places like Arizona, where there's like their STR market just tanks in the summer because I grew up there. It's very hot, right? And so they try to switch to MTR in the summer. I don't know, but yeah. So listen, like I said, the more options that one has, the more likely you are to find something that works, right? And then you're more flexible. Like that's, when I started, one of the reasons I think it's important to look at it this way is like, at first, anybody who's been trying to acquire houses, your eyes cross from all the staring at all the deals, and you're just like wondering, like, why are people, some of these wholesale deals, this makes no money as a rental. How are people buying these deals? And then you just say no, 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 no. And eventually, like, wait a second, I got to find a way to say yes to some of these. And so, like, when I joined Sub Two, my goal was I wanted to try to get one of everything, right? Like I wanted to, I got a long-term rental and a short-term rental and a Sub Two and a seller finance and a hybrid, and like all these things, because I wanted to know. And then I got a co-living. I wanted to know how to do all of these things so that when I then look at deals, I can be like, okay, maybe that's a possibility, and I know how to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, that's the ultimate way to do it. Like you said, to have as many exit strategies in your back pocket as possible, right? Because you are eventually going to run across one or two that just won't work for whatever reason.
You're gonna
And
run wait, you're gonna run across one or two that do work, is the way it works. Like our strategy is, like we have an inbox, and our goal is to connect to wholesalers, because I'm not going to be a wholesaler. So my goal is to get up to maybe between 300 and 400 deals in the inbox a week, with the hope that one of them will be good. Right. And so we're not there yet, but that's my sort of goal. I want 400 a week. And then we have to find a way to, how do we sort of efficiently sift through that monstrosity of an inbox in a way that's efficient and doesn't waste anybody's time. But I think that if the mindset is, my mindset is volume solves lots of things. Volume and time can solve a lot of problems. If you're not finding deals, then you need volume, right? If you're not happy with how much money your house is making, give it time, right?
Mhm.
Because real estate is a game of time, right? Time heals a lot of wounds. Like, I'll give you an example. So like I have this Airbnb, and it's in North Georgia, and it's fun, but it's in this like weird, it's on a hill, and the septic system went, right? And that's $25,000 for a septic system with a hill, because it's more like $10,000, but they needed to use a pump, and I don't know. So literally $25,000 down the drain. I'm literally down the drain.
Mhm.
And then and so like that killed, like that house made no money this week. Right? That I'm gonna lose money on that house, and I'm gonna say, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, I'm losing money. But I stop and I say, hold on a second. What's gonna be? I'm holding this for minimum 10 years, right? How much am I gonna make in 10 years? Right. And you look at that, and it's a very simple equation. Anybody who took basic personal finance, economics, business in school, high school, college, you just do a future value equation. The future value equation is the math formula. And if you don't like math, you can just Google it, future value equation, and plug in the numbers. It's the formula for compound interest, right?
Mhm.
So if you invest $100 at 10%, at the end of a year, you have $110. But you're still
Yeah.
making 10%, which means that now you made 10% on $110, which is $11. Next year, you have $121. Now you make 10% of that. So you make $12, right? And then you keep adding and
Yep.
it compounds. So you can do the same thing estimating the value of a house in 10 years. If you estimate the appreciation rate. So I typically go very conservative and say, nationwide, since they've been collecting data, the United States, the appreciation rate is 4%. Okay.
Hmm.
Do not use the last 5 years.
Right. The last
Right?
5 years are a wash. It's
It might go
all an
down. You might
anomaly.
lose money in the next 3 years, but over a 10-year period, 4% a year. And you can just plug in the number, the value of the house now, annually compounding at 4%, what's going to be worth in 10 years. Right.
Hmm.
And that's how much. And so, you're talking about a difference of, okay, so that septic system cost me $25,000, but in 10 years, the house will make me $300,000. So, okay, fine. Okay. As long as you have enough money in the bank and enough equity, like you always want to keep a little bit of money and a little bit of equity. And the
Hmm.
equity is just in case, so you can get a loan that in an emergency, you can pay things so that you're not over leveraged, or you have a house that would sell easily and quickly, like, stuff like that.
Yeah, like you
So
said, like a
time and then
septic
volume.
system,
Yeah.
or even if not a septic system, you could have a foundation issue, a roof issue. It's
I'm
always
dealing with
good
an
to just
eviction,
have that
right?
reserve.
I'm getting
Yep.
I get like a $15,000 mentorship I'm in right now. It's called Dealing with an Eviction in Baltimore City. Okay. So by the way, it's an expensive mentorship, but by the way, it's less expensive as an education than many other mentorships out there. And I'm going to get more out of this experience probably than I would have gotten out of those $40,000 mentorships where they give you nothing, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, so I'm learning about evictions. I'm learning how to avoid them. I'm learning how, what to, how to look, what to look for. And the answer usually is good property managers. Yeah. So Sharon says 11 months to get them out. I think I'm pushing 6 or 7. Yeah.
Yeah, that is an expensive lesson.
It's expensive, but also remember, again, same thing, future value equation. It's like just like if it's the same thing. I'm gonna lose money on this house this year, but I'm here for the long term, right? I'm doing this for the long term. So if you can't afford a $20,000 hit on your house, then you're probably over leveraged.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that are over leveraged. You and I were talking off recording about the RV park we went and walked yesterday.
Right.
The story that we're kind of starting to piece together is I think the owners are over leveraged. That's why they're trying to almost fire sale three assets that are all side by side by side because they're trying to build a $1.5 million processing plant 3 hours away. Like that's
Right.
great, but why would we gave them a verbal offer of 30% off their listing price and they jumped on it.
Oh
And we
wow.
walked it and we're like, we might need to negotiate down more.
Really?
Yeah. But right, like I can kind of see it because to what we can see from that walk and from the conversation with them over those several hours was that what would make this a deal to them is if we got them as close to that 1.5 as humanly possible, which means taking either two out of the three or all three of the assets over completely.
Right.
So, okay, that's fine. But now we need to prove the income of the other two assets. We already know the income of one.
Right.
Okay. What would make it a deal for us is getting it as steep of a discount as possible,
Yeah,
you
because
know?
then you can refinance it.
Right. So how do you make those two work? And that's where we're at.
So you have to add more value, or you have to lower the price.
Yeah. Well, right now it seems like we would have to lower the price that we would acquire the assets for. Probably, I'm going to try to get all three, but we have to prove the income of the other two, which is two metal buildings that they're using as cold or cool storage, and then a house with a mother-in-law. But based on the area and the population being on the lower side, it's great for RV parks. Is that house going to rent? I don't know. It's probably not super desirable for an Airbnb,
Right.
in a town of 6,600 people.
Yeah, but maybe you can combine those two. You can maybe rent it out to somebody who will act as your operator for the RV park.
Yeah, we
And then you can
could.
maybe save on your you can find a way to save on the cost of the employment costs.
Yeah, I'm thinking, like I said, we might try to give the mother-in-law to them and then maybe do a bunkhouse out of the regular
I
house.
think they would probably
And
sell their mother-in-law for very cheap. Most people would sell their mother-in-law for very cheap. Yeah, for sure.
I don't have one, so I couldn't tell you.
Fine, fine. Yeah, I know. I
I
love
would,
my mother-in-law, especially if she's watching this. Um, I don't think she will be. But you know what happens? You know what happens when you miss your mother-in-law?
what's that?
You reload. Okay, fine. So,
I
yeah.
I thought that was just ex-girlfriends.
Yeah. Yeah, girlfriends you can get rid of. That's the problem.
That's true. Mother-in-laws just keep coming back, huh?
Yep, 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 yep. And if you love your wife, you owe her too. That's the problem.
Oof. Yeah, I don't think you can return the wife, huh?
No, you don't want to.
Not even if they're too expensive.
Right. So yeah, so I
So
think RV parks are cool. I think RV parks are cool. They're pretty
I think
low,
they're
like low entry. Like you don't need as much construction.
No, they're very low entry. Right now, the primary value add that we're finding is we can raise the rents. There will be some rehab needed around it, like to the office, to the bathhouse. There's gonna be need some amenities that need to be added. There's gonna be landscaping that needs to be done. There's gonna be marketing that needs to be done. There's vacancies that need to be filled. But the cost to develop a pad is about 7 grand, about
Per
5 to 7
pad.
grand per pad.
Yeah.
So that's to run a 30 amp, a 50 amp sewage and water and pour gravel.
Yeah.
So 5 to 7 grand to develop a pad when the rent rates are 550, 600 a month. You can do the math on that, 550 a
That's pretty
month
good.
times 10, you
Yeah,
already
for
made
sure.
it.
For
So
sure.
you make your money back pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure.
But I like it because like I said it's kind of like the multifamily assets. It's less operating costs, it's lower insurance. And where we are dealing with hurricanes, it's less to take care of. If a hurricane comes, guess what? You just tell your tenants to hook up and then they leave and then they come back.
Right. Yeah, yeah. For sure. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember Katrina. I was in Atlanta. All the people from New Orleans came to Atlanta. We took care of them in our hospital and clinics.
Yeah, we didn't go to Atlanta for Katrina. We went to Atlanta for Gustav, one of the subsequent hurricanes. But
Apparently, when you
yeah,
build a city under sea level and you're at the sea, bad things can happen.
well, also when even though you have the second most irrigation in the world, second only to like Holland, um, when your government doesn't clean out your catch basins, flooding tends to happen.
Hey,
That's been the local scandal, so to speak, is
yeah.
the sewage and water board itself. Because we just had a hurricane 2 weeks ago. No flooding, even though they didn't turn the pumps on. Like you'd be amazed, but they should have turned the pumps on anyway. You don't want all that water to build up. But either way, yeah, like that's the advantage of it, right? Is there's all this irrigation. The water absorbs a lot of it because we're in that. I mean, the ground absorbs a lot of it because we're in the marshlands. So, but that's also why we were looking at developing pads of gravel and not concrete, so we don't have to report pads every 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. And why do you need concrete for? You know what I mean?
Exactly. When you can just go in there and you can regrade once a month or so and just keep it looking
Right.
really pretty, keep all your potholes smoothed out and keep
Right.
keep your gravel resurfaced.
Yeah, for sure.
So is that what you're working on primarily? It's just co-living? Are you looking into any other
No, that
asset
I'll do
classes right
anything.
now?
I'll do anything. I like when it at least breaks even as long-term rental as a backup as a second option. But like I said, well, I'm looking at everything. The bigger the spread, it's easier to find private capital, of course. But I'll do equity partnership if the spread's not as big. Um, I'll do mixes of both. Like if somebody wants 10% interest and 10% equity, I'll do that also. Right. Like I said, I think that the one thing I liked about, sub two pace Morby is that I don't like being limited by what's possible. I'll work something out, like there was a lady
Yeah.
who just this Denver house that's gonna be co-living. She wanted, she's a single mother, she has kids. So we just said that so she, she wanted to sort of like a semi-guaranteed cash flow. So we just
Hmm.
set it up so the first amount of like the first so many $100 every month goes to her. So it's not guaranteed, but she'll make more of the cash flow than I will unless we make a double of that amount. But let's be
Yeah.
flexible. Let's make, and she said that that's what sealed the deal for her. Like that's what. So I'm fine. Like better a smaller percentage of something than 100% of nothing. You know what I mean? Sharon asked me
Yeah, I
about
love.
skeletons in Baltimore. Um, those scare the crap out of me. Halloween's coming up, so like, yeah, maybe not. I don't know. I think you need to be to deal with those. So he's talking about these houses that just get gutted, and these townhouses or row houses. I think you really need to be a very experienced builder, contractor, flipper in the city to get into something like that, which I'm not. Um, Contractors
Really?
make me nervous.
I heard you could get pretty good skeletons at Party City, but they might be going out of business now. Who knows? Maybe
Oh,
that
really?
would be the next
You get
Spirit
skeletons in the
Halloween.
anatomy lab in my medical school. They're worth
Yeah,
about the same too.
I don't think they let you borrow those though.
No, we got to take them home in medical school for that semester, but we had to return them, and you couldn't substitute chicken bones either. They'd notice.
Oh, you tried?
No, I didn't try. I did used to try to freak people out with them. We used to do that in anatomy. We probably were not as respectful as we should have been. You have to, like when you're spending hours and hours in there, with cadavers, it could get. You got to find a way to to ease that tension.
Yeah, well, I imagine a part of it's probably just being desensitized to it too over time anyway.
For sure,
You
yeah, for
know,
sure,
in a way you have to be because
for
you're
sure.
expected to treat people under pressure.
Like, there's nothing you want worse than like if your surgeon comes in the office and be like, "Ew, it's gross." Like, ew. Like you'd be like, if your doctor did that, you'd be like, "Oh no."
Yeah, like find me another doctor.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but so you guys are focusing primarily on single families right now. Are you looking at
Yeah,
any other asset classes in the near future or even longer
just
future?
no. I think I want to stick with the single family for now, and then just maximize the number of exit strategies and see where it takes me. Right? It maybe one asset class, one sort of exit strategy starts working, and you make connections, and you can build from there. That's fine. But I like everybody else, I had the shiny object syndrome when I started. But so now I'm like I said, okay, so no, I'm sticking with the single family, this model of connecting with wholesalers and with private capital, and then having as many exit strategies as I can. And then once I get this sort of mastered, if it ever gets boring, which it hasn't yet, then maybe I'll start deep diving into something else.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Like I said, the reason we started looking at RV parks was 'cause everybody else was talking about they wanted to get into multifamily. But
Yeah,
one of the
I feel like
things
a
that,
lot of people say that. Like everybody says that because it's like the cool thing to say. I wonder how many people who say I'm getting into multifamily successfully get into multifamily, because it's, to me, the concern I had always with multifamily is that you're less diversified. You know what I mean? So if you know
well,
what you're doing and you know how to do it, then it works. It's much more lucrative, it seems like. But you also could be putting a lot of eggs in one basket. And these things do, like, all these people are like, oh, it's great. We got this apartment complex on seller finance at, whatever, at a discount. And then you have to, and so you have to ask the question, well, why is that apartment complex being sold at a discount? The answer
hmm
is because something went terribly wrong, right? And if something went terribly wrong with that person who is a multifamily investor, like, and so unless it's just like anything else, like if I crash in one house, like if you have enough houses, you can sort of absorb that cost. But if you have a 500 unit complex and that something happens with that, who knows? I don't know what could go wrong. But I got nothing against it. It's just I'm trying to get good at this first.
well, when we went to Squat Up Summit, multifamily was the first little banner that went on everybody's lanyards that they ran out of. So everyone and their mother said that because Pace had made a YouTube video saying he was basically transitioning away from having as many single families.
And
But
and that's right. And that's probably what somebody with his level of equity and cash available should do, right?
right.
But I think Pace is very strategic, it seems like, in that he also probably wants to do that. He gets people excited about multifamily because then, hey, guess what? When he says I need investors for my multifamily property, a lot of people are excited about multifamily.
Yeah, but also kind of like you said, we're seeing too is that a lot of loans are starting to be called due. Refinancing is getting more difficult in that asset class.
Right,
And there are some people that do it and do it really well. Like one of my good friends who's also a physician of Ishkar,
right.
like
I
that's
met him.
all he
Yeah,
does. Yeah, that's all he does is multifamily. And he does
yeah.
it really
Sure.
well.
Listen, there's anything that people are getting rich on, they're good at, right? You know, and those are the people that make the YouTube videos. The guys who lost everything and went in multifamily don't make YouTube videos.
Yeah, that's true.
And if they do, no one wants to watch it because no one wants to hear the bad news, right?
I don't know. There are a lot of people that enjoy their gossip. They probably would watch it, but those people just don't want to embarrass themselves online.
Maybe it could be like whatever it is. Like there's a problem of sampling bias. Like the stuff that you watch on social media is is selected, right? Is
You know,
selected.
I find it's two-pronged too. It's not just sampling bias, it's also confirmation bias because you
Sure.
typically follow the people that you want to hear from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, I did that also, which is why I don't look at social media anymore. Right. In terms, I try to be a producer of social media, not a consumer of it.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me because I grew up before social media. Like the best part about being my age is that I did all my embarrassing things before the internet, right? There is probably some horribly embarrassing photos of me somewhere in the attic of my fraternity house, but they're probably so old that they're like moldy and no one's ever going to see them again. Like these kids these days, like all these pictures of them doing God knows what or on a Chinese server farm, just waiting to be, to blackmail them, right? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, yeah, so it's easy for me to say like I'm not going to, get into that stuff, but I did in the beginning. It's very easy to get drawn into that stuff, and I think that that's a mistake. I think you should pick one thing. It's fine. Like at the beginning, you kind of have to be a little bit of a shiny object thing because you have to find like what resonates with you, what you're good at, what works for you, right? And so, like for me, I like being sort of on above, like putting things together, making things happen, finding solutions, like seeing like how we're going to put this together, how this is going to work in the future, how we can bring in other things to be more successful. That's like what I like to do. So the idea of like wholesaling to me is like that would be torture for me to have to cold call people, right? It would be torture for me to have to deal with sellers all the time because just it wouldn't work for me, right? I
Oh yeah.
wouldn't work, as an integrator because if somebody puts the letters C and R and M together, it gives me like I sweat, like I get anxious, right? It's like overwhelming, like I like the thought of
I am an integrator. Believe me, I don't always enjoy working as an
God bless
integrator.
you. I'm not knocking any of these things, right? There are people that are amazing
Yeah.
also. They love cold calling. God bless them. Like it's fine. It's just like you have to figure out you have to try a little bit of everything to see what resonates with you and see what's good for you. And that's great, right? And then, but at some point you got to say, okay, and then I think that Pace when he does that, he talks about the importance of selecting an avatar. And I think that's the reason it's important is because I think that you have to first be good at one thing.
Yeah, you definitely
First,
do.
be good
And
at one thing. Patient. Get good at one thing, and then you can then see once you feel like you've got that done, you can then go to the next thing. Right. So, like for me, what I want to get good at is finding people to do things. I want to get good at finding really good qualified people, right? Because I don't like, for example, I'm starting to research, maybe getting into residential assistant living. I don't want to learn how to operate assisted living. I want to get good
right.
at finding a good operator that would want to work with me. I don't want to manage co-living. I want to get good at finding good co-living property managers, right? That's what I want to get good at. And finding ways to get people to do that are I want to get people that are good at what they do to be able to do what they do. And then I want to be able to then be good at what I do, which is sort of orchestrating that or trying to find a way to get that to work together for like to fulfill the vision in the long term.
Well, in a lot of ways, that's what an integrator is too. Like Pace uses it almost like this oversimplified term of like, you just toss me a bunch of stuff and then I like, you know, throw my hands together and make magic happen. And
By the
then
way, that's
unicorns
probably
and
how he sees it in his head.
right, that is. But that's what I'm saying. Like it's all unicorns and fairy dust and then poof, like magic.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, the integrator is the architect of the team. Like that's
Right.
more of what I do is I lean more on the operations side and like finding the right people, putting the right seats with the right superpowers to do what they can do and that they can do it well.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's the same idea, right? It's the same idea. Setting up the systems is fine. But I actually, that's what I hired as an operations manager, and she's going to set up the systems, right? And I'm going to tell her, she asked me, like, what do you think of like this CRM? And my response was, do you like it? And she said, yeah, I
Yeah.
like it for X, Y, and Z. I was like, great, let's do it.
Yep.
Do I like it? I don't know. I don't like any of them. So I don't like it. Of course not. I hate all those things. I know they're necessary. Like, I know we have to have them. I know all this stuff is extremely important, and it's like it's indispensable. You can't make this happen without these kind of systems. But it's just not what I'm at. So if everybody can, like, when they go through their when they go through their kind of shiny object phase, is to really find the thing that you are that resonates with you. And it may take some time, right? You may, and the other thing, like, you need to be patient sometimes, right? It may take you a year to figure that out. I know that's hard for people because
Hmm.
they want to just, because all they're seeing on the social media is the guy who's closing 30 wholesale deals a month, and they want to like jump to that, right? So they're going to just start calling people, right?
Yeah. But they don't realize how many leads you have to call to even get to 30
Right.
contracts. Yeah. And like I said, that's what I like about that shiny object phase is that it gives people the opportunity to not only find what their superpower is, it also gives them the opportunity to find the asset class and or exit strategy that they connect with the best, right?
Right.
Like you were saying, like you want to do co-living. You're not just doing co-living because you're like, it's a cash cow. It's like, no, you're doing co-living because you have a deeper purpose and connection to it.
Right. Yeah, yeah. But and listen, and I think that listen, I'm a very religious person. I think you can find meaning. There is meaning in every deal. If it's only that you're providing a place for a family to live, to rent a house,
Hmm.
right? And you're being responsive as a landlord, right? And you're making sure that things get fixed when they need to get fixed, right?
Hmm.
And then, you can you're helping somebody, especially with creative, like you're helping somebody, usually you're helping somebody out of a jam with creative finance, right? And almost all those deals, like like I had all the creative deals I have been helping solve a problem for somebody.
Yeah. And I think what people get lost in is that purpose is not always high enough for them. To the ones that they just want to put a family in and that's all they're doing to them is just a roof over that family's head. They're not deeply connected enough. And so that's why I try to tell people is like find the asset class or the exit strategy, whatever your choice is, that resonates with you on a deeper level.
Right.
Like
Don't find the one
we
that makes the most money per se.
right. Like the RV parks for us, it does solve an affordability issue here.
Right.
It also solves a liability issue here because like we were talking about hurricanes a little while ago, you know. But down that way, like down south of New Orleans, once you get south of I-10, like you do start seeing less and less income. It's more fishermen. And right now those industries are getting killed by fuel prices, overregulation, and um just just food being imported from other countries. So they need affordable places to live.
Yeah.
And we can provide them a place that they can put an RV, whether they bought it used or bought it brand new. We can get their rent down instead of not paying $2,000 a month for a
Right.
place.
For sure. For sure. For sure. Yeah, for
You
sure.
know,
But and once somebody you pick that one thing, even if, like, by the way, you can change it later, but I really think if you focus on that one thing and really get good at that to the best of your ability, I think eventually things will open up. I think they will. And even if it's like this, even if you go through it, like, it's okay to not like being in real estate, by the way. That's also okay. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, you might go through this and after a year or something, you might be like, I don't like this, right? I don't like any of this. And right. maybe somebody doesn't like it. It's like okay to not like it, you know. There's lots of jobs you
Yeah,
could have. And I think so. Sharon says nonsense. I think it's possible to like this job. I think it's possible that every job you cannot like, right? Um,
I think so too. And some people don't want to have the level of control either. Like you were talking about, that was what pushed you into real estate. But some people don't want that. They don't want
right,
that burden or that responsibility.
right,
You know, to you, you felt like, well, my life was being controlled, whether it was by a soulless corporation that was above you in a hierarchy,
right,
or was a soulless corporation that ran that index fund, that ETF or the
right,
S&P 500, whatever it was.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. Whatever it is, like and like I said, like some people like a job and they just like to go to work and they don't want to. They just and their passion is doing the stuff after work or that's it. You know, like listen, there's a crazy amount of uncertainty when you do the real estate thing. There's a lot of and there's what I've noticed is, you know, there's a point that people really struggle with this, whether they're going to lend or they're going to invest. And the
Hmm.
point is the point where you have all the data you need, right? You've invested, you've done all the numbers line up, and then but then you gotta pull the trigger. And
Yeah.
that point, there's this gap where it's hard for people to like make that little tiny like last step. And I totally get that, right? Because there's a fear like, what if you make a mistake? What, things can go wrong, and I get it, right? And so some people they don't, that's too hard for them, and that's fine. Like you can put your money in an index fund and you'll do great. Like you'll have a happy life. Like, by the way, you're never going to find happiness with more money. Anyways, it doesn't matter, right?
No,
Jeff Bezos had a miserable marriage. I guarantee you he wasn't happy, right? Bill Gates got
no.
divorced.
Yep.
So yeah,
So,
so like you don't necessarily but Steve Jobs, by the way, on his deathbed probably wasn't thrilled about how rich he was either. You know what I mean? It doesn't like,
no.
but if you have work that's meaningful for you, but sometimes people that little leap is what's really challenging for them. Like I remember very clearly. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and everybody has a pool, so everybody learns to swim at the age of 4 or 5. I remember very clearly being on the edge of a pool when I was 4.5, 5 years old with our neighbor, and our neighbor was a swim instructor, so we went to her house in the pool, and I remember standing on the edge of the pool, and she's there to catch me. And so this is a completely safe. I know in my head that she's going to catch me and I'm not going to drown. But there's this like block and I didn't want to
Right.
jump, right? Because there's part of me that just says this is insane, you're going to die. Even though I know it's not going to happen. And and I remember just at one point just that voice saying you don't do it, the fear didn't go away. It's just I did it anyway, right? I just jumped anyway. And
Yeah.
I think that for me, I think that for a lot of people is that a lot of people are waiting for the fear to go away for them to jump into these things. And I think that's just the wrong mindset. I think correct mindset is you have to feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yep.
If you
A
look at
thousand
numbers,
percent.
it's okay. You might lose it all for sure. And if you do, you'll survive, right? People have lost everything and survived, right? And
Yeah.
so, but I mean, obviously, if you've done all the, if you shouldn't just throw your money like, I'm not talking like just start throwing your money at things unless you want to throw it at me. Everybody's welcome to throw their money at me. It's fine. But in general, it's not a good strategy, right? But if you've done all the research, right? Like the deal looks good, the numbers look good, you did the appropriate due diligence, then you're just going to have to at some point take that leap. And for some people, that's too hard, and I get that, and that's fine. And maybe then this is probably not the business for you. Like you want to do something like transaction coordination or something like that. But I think in life in general, and if you ever want to have anything, you're always going to come across this thing. And I think too many people, they just think that they need to wait for them to no longer be afraid. And I remember hearing it. I don't remember who was like, maybe, I don't know if it was John Lennon or Paul McCartney or something. Like it was Paul McCartney, I think, like where they were interviewing Paul McCartney and he's like 40 years into his career, and they asked him like, do you ever get nervous? And he said, yeah, he still gets nervous going out on stage. Paul McCartney, right? Like after 40
Yeah.
years. of being one of the most famous musicians ever and selling out Wembley Stadium and stuff like that. Like, and he was still nervous. And because the part of your brain that gets nervous and is afraid is not rational, and
Yeah,
it can't be reasoned with. So you're not going to talk that part of your brain into not being afraid.
it can't be reasoned with,
Eventually,
and you never outgrow it either. It doesn't just
exactly.
go
Eventually, I
away.
think what
You don't.
happens for people is that it lessens a little bit, or it's a muscle. Like you get good at ignoring. You get good at ignoring it, but waiting for it to go away. That's I think what people. So like we've had that happen where people like I've had that happen with me where people told me, okay, listen, this is the type of deal I'm looking for. I want to invest this much. I want this return.
Hmm.
And so we find the deal that checks all those boxes. And then when it comes time to say, hey, what do you think? They're like, I don't know. And they say no. And so
Yeah,
I think that that's, and you know, that's going to be the difference. I think the people that are successful in this and not are the ones that are willing to sort of kind of deal with that fear. It doesn't go away. I don't think so. It hasn't for me yet. Like I still get really nervous, wiring the money and signing the papers. Like I haven't been doing this so long, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to see um, for people like if that goes away. I don't know that it does. I think you get good at it's like any other muscle. Like you get good at just
I
ignoring.
don't. I don't think it does. I think it's just a muscle that you train, and you train to ignore it. And
Right,
because I mean, I've had a career of doing all kinds of crazy things, from cold calling, from selling in person, high ticket, low ticket, mid ticket, door knocking. I bought a business. I've bought vehicles. I've done, some of them were good investments. Some of them were really bad investments.
right,
And I've been on the floor crying, like not knowing where the money was going to come from or how it was going to work out. But like to your point, nobody's coming to put you in jail. Nobody's
right.
coming to kill you. Don't borrow money from the mob. Um,
No, yeah, yeah. Not that I do
you
anymore.
know, yeah. So as long as you don't do that, like nobody's coming to throw you in jail. Nobody's coming to kill you. Like you're going to survive. The worst case
Right.
scenario is typically you borrow money from your family to keep your cell phone on or keep a roof over your head or whatever, and you go get a job.
Yeah, yeah. Or bankruptcy. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it clears after 7 years. Your credit recovers after 7 years.
Yeah. But to your point, like every time I speak in public, I don't ever feel any less nervous. When Pace pulls me up on family night or something, there's 1,900 people on a Zoom.
Right,
I might not be standing directly on a stage in front of 1,900 people, but it doesn't mean I'm not still shaking on the other side of this camera.
right. I mean, there are some weird people that are probably they don't have that same level of nerves. Like some people are probably like that, but I think that's probably a sign of like psychopathology. I think there probably were something happened to them when they were younger.
Maybe, but
Could
like I
be. I
said,
don't
I
know.
think I think most people just don't display it. Like I
Yeah,
said,
could be.
because people come to me, even they say like, "Oh, will you do this, this, and this? Like, how do you do it so well, or how do you do it so confidently?" And I tell them I don't. I just do it scared.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Just do it scared. Yeah, for sure.
That that's it, man. Just do it scared. And I think real estate ultimately is a much more simplified business than a lot of other small businesses where you have to find like things like market fit and is your product even any good? You don't know
Right,
that if you're developing a product or if you're developing a service or if you're trying to break into a new market. You don't know what gatekeeps and roadblocks lie ahead of you. But with real estate, man, you're buying something that exists already, typically, unless you're doing
right,
development. But most people are not starting in development anyway.
right,
So you're buying something that exists. It is a high ticket item, but still an item that everybody needs, just like
right,
food, man.
right,
Like you can't live without a house. I mean, you can. It's just not a very enjoyable
right.
existence.
Yeah, it's
But
just it's a challenge. For
yeah,
sure. Yeah, for sure. And it holds its value. So it's not like if you buy a business, the business could be go completely belly up, but a
right.
house is always going to have some value in it.
Yeah, the house ultimately.
That's why banks love mortgages
Yeah,
because
that's
they
why they
can
love
always take the house
mortgage.
back. And so even though it's not what they want, it's hedging the bet.
Right. And there's some level of security in that, like you were saying earlier with the stocks and ETFs, right? Those can always tank. They can always go down. They historically will recover, and you have to be in the market no matter what if you're in stocks
Right.
because you're if you're not in it at the worst times, you're going to miss the best days.
Yeah.
Nobody can ever predict the best days. They've tried for hundreds of years. Nobody's done it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Even Warren Buffett
So,
doesn't invest in the market, he invests in the business.
right. But ultimately, I think that's what we're talking about here is you have to invest in yourself.
Yeah, for
You know,
sure.
you
Yeah, for sure.
you have to invest in yourself, and pulling the trigger is an investment in your future confidence and your ability to perform and execute under pressure.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
It's not any different. I'm sure you were scared shitless going into your first surgery.
So yeah, I think I don't do surgery, but yeah, so no, I remember definitely being scared. Yeah, for sure. And I remember, yeah, you just have to kind of do it. You know what I mean? Right? You don't want to be on the other
Yeah.
end of that person, but whatever. You don't want to be the patient in that situation, but thank God, all those people did okay.
Yeah, thank God they all did okay. And
Yeah.
like you said, you probably had other good physicians around you to
Yeah,
help you
yeah.
out.
Like, yeah, I don't, yeah, for sure. We're not talking about jumping into something just out of the blue. You know what I mean? We're not talking about investing in oil fields in Texas and you've never been there. You don't even know what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, like being able to do a little bit of future casting on your asset and your market helps a lot. One of the other things we saw, some of the other parks that we underwrote that didn't pencil out, they were trying to future cast based on LNG projects. They're building a lot of LNG plants along the coast here. Well, guess what? Those invite a lot of term workers, and that might be good for 9 months to 5 years. What are you going to do when all those workers leave, though? And it goes right back to the small town of 5,000, 6,000 people.
Yeah. So maybe like, yeah, that'd be good for an RV park where you could break even. You could make your money in 7 years so that even if you had to sell at a loss, at a discount, you're still up over the
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, unless it's got tourism, which most of those towns don't, you know, you should out of luck. So I like what you were talking about earlier with the future value equation because you have to be able to do a little bit of that in your underwriting too.
I do that. Like I do that for the investors. Like if somebody's going to be an equity partner, that's part of the pitch because that's what you're buying. That's what the equity is giving you, right? And
Hmm.
so it gives you an estimate of what your 10-year return on investment would be or 5-year or whatever you want to whatever numbers you want to be. And so you just you have it just it's very simple. You calculate the value, the future value at whatever time point, and then you go to your amortization table and see what the balance of the mortgage will be if it's a sub two or any house. And that difference is what you can that's your estimated profit at sale minus commissions. And
Yeah.
so or that's an equity that you could borrow against or that's whatever like you have flexibility.
Yeah.
There's a
I
reason
said,
that wealthy people invest in real estate. It's not because they
yeah.
watch HGTV, you know what I mean? Right, like
Oh man.
the royal family in England is rich not because of their social media following. They don't have subscription services. It's because they're the largest one of the largest landowners in the world. That's why. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so this is not like somebody tried to sell me on some sort of investment scheme which couldn't lose, of course, based something on whole life insurance, and I didn't understand it. And my general rule is if I don't understand it, I'm not investing in it. I'm not
Yeah.
because I'm a relatively intelligent person, and so like if you can't, and he was like, "Oh, it's this new thing, and we figured it out, and we whatever." And I said, "Listen, the stock market and insurance has been around for thousands of years. Like it's not new,
Hmm.
right? They've had
Right.
markets in Greece, Rome. You know what I mean? And so if this was so great, somebody would have figured it out.
Yeah.
And if it's so
Oh,
great, everybody would be doing it. So if everybody's not doing it, then there's something missing. Now you can flip that on its head, right? If everybody's doing it, then it must be great. So all the wealthy
hmm.
people are investing in real estate, and they have for millennia.
I would add the caveat that everyone that's successful is doing it because there's a lot of things that everyone is doing that is not good.
No, I mean everybody's
Everyone,
doing successfully.
yeah, everyone owns a TV. That doesn't mean you should go watch
No,
Netflix
I mean
though.
I'm taking all the wealthy people, like the really successful people are doing. That's right. You're right.
Yeah.
Everything that's successful people, they all do the same thing. They all do this one thing. So there's got to be something to it. And I think that, and then not only that, then all these wealthy, successful people have used their success and wealth to manipulate the legal system and the tax codes to benefit them. Now, thank God it's a free country, so you can take advantage of those loopholes and those that stuff that really probably shouldn't be allowed, but I don't make the rules. Don't hate the
Right.
player, hate the game, And so but you can take advantage of it because that's another advantage of owning real estate. That's something that you don't really even underwrite for. That's a cherry on top.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Equity is the icing on the cake, and the tax benefits are the cherry on top, right?
Yeah. Well, that, and like I said, I think the predictability is, the whipped cream that goes with the cherry on top, right?
Sure.
Because, like
Making me
we've
hungry.
said yeah, right. Like we said several times throughout this, like real estate is not going anywhere. It's not a phase. It's not a fad. Like people have lived in some form or another of real estate since the beginning of time, whether it was
Right.
in a cave in a mountain, or it was a
Right.
mud hut, or it was a Tudor home, or it was a
Right.
stone whatever, like people will have and always will live in in some form of dwelling or shelter. And like I said, that makes your future casting a lot easier. That makes your underwriting a lot easier. Like we did that with the park. We looked at it and we said, well, if we build it to this many pads and we can fill the pads, we can have it this vacancy level or this occupancy level, depending on how you're looking at it.
Right.
Same coin, different sides. Um, and we can add this much value to the property by year 5, 6, 10. We'll have, this much in equity and we can refi and pull that cash out and then we can buy another park.
You have options or not, or maybe you're just making enough cash flow and you're like, I don't need anything else, I'm gonna go do whatever hobby, dream, something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like but you have that flexibility. I think once you break out, somebody once said the problem with the rat race is that whether you win or lose, you're still a rat. So
Yeah.
the goal is not to be in the rat race, right?
The
And
goal is
so
not to be in the rat race. And I think the goal is also not to trap yourself on one track. Because I see a lot of people do that too. They get out of the rat race to get on this entrepreneurial journey. And they're like, okay, so if I buy this home, buy this, and then I buy another home, and then I buy another home, and then by year 30, and it's like, dude, you have no idea what's gonna happen in 30 years. You could be
right,
dead in two. Like there's no
yeah, for
telling.
sure. That's why I'm like,
So
that's why I'm very big on, have as many options as possible.
yeah,
Right. And
because by
so for me,
limiting your
I
options,
love
you're
my job, but
recreating
even
the
if I
rat
didn't,
race.
I wouldn't quit it yet. Like all those
Yeah.
people that are rushing to quit their W-2, I think that's a mistake. Until you have cash flow that's like at least half, until your cash flow is enough that you could live uncomfortably on, you know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
Like you could still pay your bills and maybe you're not going out for dinner, as Dave Ramsey says, rice and beans and rice, but you're not gonna like freak out, right? And then you
Yeah.
could but I think people sometimes jump ship too quickly. Listen, some make it, some don't. It's funny, like the thing about real estate also that I lived through. I remember very clearly the crash of '08. I guess now we're getting to an age where people may not remember that. So like young people in real estate, but like I remember that very clearly. And what was very interesting to me, and the reason that I sort of, I had an experience investing in real estate because of a friend of mine who did it. And he was like, I don't know if you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, but like
Yep.
he was the rich dad. For
Hmm.
me, I didn't realize it until later, but he was giving me some advice, which I didn't take because I was over, like medical training is pretty all in, it's all encompassing. And
Hmm.
so, but if you looked at the crash, the people that lost everything in the housing boom bubble were the people that were trying to buy and flip, and they were over leveraging their flips.
Yep.
The buy and hold investor did fine through the crash and usually did very well because what happened
Yeah.
is that they had cash flow coming in, right? And they could then buy houses for dirt. Like I said,
Yep.
I got a house in Atlanta in 2010 for $35,000. It was a nice house, right?
Yeah.
Worth 10 times that now, right? Or more. And so if the people they had, but what happened is people were leveraging on leveraging on leveraging. They had 5 houses, and then all of a sudden they can't sell them because they're flipping them, and now they're toast. Whereas the people who have 4 houses that are cash flowing, okay, so the
Hmm.
value of the house dropped, but they're not selling it. So what do they care? They're still getting their rent every month.
Yeah.
And then what happened was and then the government responded to the crash by tanking interest rates. So now they all refinance. Now they're making more money, right?
Yeah.
And now they have equity. They have some equity or whatever. Or they can buy houses for cheap. So like the Biden ones that's like I said, time heals all wounds. Is that if you can hold on to those houses, it just seems like that's the best way to do anything. And listen, if you think about it, if you can somehow acquire 4 houses, let's say you only get 4 houses, right? That are
Hmm.
long-term rentals. And all you do is take those 4 houses and you pay down the loan. So there's no debt on them, right? So
Hmm.
maybe you're making $1,500 a month per house, right? That's $6,000 a month in cash flow. Like that'll change your life
Yeah.
for
That's
most
a
people.
salary for some people.
Yeah, for most people. And then you can still work part-time and make another $3,000, $4,000 or whatever a month or whatever it is, right? And so that's the type. But if you have 10, like you can then you may want to just retire, like whatever. I don't need, you may not want to be a billionaire, and that's fine. It seems like a lot of work to be a billionaire. They're all
I'm
crazy.
sure it is,
All
but
fucking nuts.
strictly speaking, you don't even need that many properties, especially with the, like you were saying, the level of appreciation over time. You have a handful of properties, you will achieve like a millionaire status just by your net worth alone.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, so I think that that's the way to go. So like if you have a W-2, you should keep it, and instead of dumping it to be a wholesaler or something like that, I would stick with that W-2 and then try to be more patient and just slowly acquire. I think you're better off in the long term, you know, getting 2 houses in a year than you are wholesaling 2 houses a month.
Yeah,
Even though in that year you make less money, over time you'll make much more in the long run.
yeah. And like I said too, that's the beauty of having so many options. I always tell people it's not just creative finance, it's creative income. So it's like you were saying earlier, it's structuring the deal in a way that makes sense for you. It's finding the asset class or exit strategy that makes the most sense for you. Like for me, I wasn't all that attracted to single family homes. I wanted to take a little bit bigger chunks out of my cash flow goals at a time.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
that's why we looked at different asset classes, but that's fine. Like to each their own. It solves different problems and it speaks to different people for different reasons.
Yeah, for me, I have a 10-year plan, and then and then now it's like to get it, scale this up and get it as many as it can over 10 years. And if I'm more successful than anticipated, then whatever, then I'll decide. That's the beauty of it. Like I want to be able to decide what I do. Do I want to continue working? Great. I don't care about I love my job. I just want to be able
Yeah.
to decide what I want to do with it. And if they tell me, you got to do X, Y, and Z, I want to say, forget it, then I'm leaving and not have to worry about anything really.
Yeah, similarly, I try to set up milestones because, like we were saying, you get on that one track and all you did was recreate the rat race. You just don't work for somebody else.
Right.
So, like with this park, when we looked at it, they had KOA had approached the previous owners. And we were like, well, would we want to franchise it? Well, we can't franchise it right now. It's not big enough. It doesn't fit their
Right.
model. And my partners were like, well, we should. And I was like, well, why don't we just do this? Why don't we just build the park to that size and we can decide then?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or
Like
maybe you'll keep it.
KOA,
Like maybe you decide.
yeah, they require 75 pads anyway. So guess what? You're 40 pads short. Build in like a 200 grand construction budget and see where it goes. Like
Yeah. And
you're
if you
going to
have the
get
model
there.
and if you have the business plan, then you'll find somebody to lend you the money if the
Right.
numbers work.
Yeah. You just have to make sure your numbers pencil out and they pencil out well. And, one thing I learned is if it underwrites at a decent price and you can get it at a little bit of a better price, guess what?
Even better.
It's going to be even easier to find money.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You be conservative. Yeah. And be patient. I think a lot of people are just, I didn't I remember I fell into this trap when I first joined the sub two, which is like this, like, I need to get my first deal by now.
Hmm.
I'm in a rush to get that first deal. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that you should set that kind of, you can set a goal, and you should set lofty goals. Like I'm all about setting big goals. It's important to set big goals. Like my dad said, a very wise thing, which is, um, if you try to climb Mount Everest, and you only make it halfway up, the view is still pretty damn good,
Yeah.
right? And so maybe you don't make it to the top of Everest, but you made it up, and you made it further than you would have if you had no goals.
Yeah.
And you might make it
Well,
halfway up and be like, I'm happy up here. Like I don't need to go any further. I'm good.
When it goes back to, I'm sure you've probably read The Gap and the Gain, huh?
Yeah, oh, that's my oh, such a good book.
It is.
That
And
is the most life-changing book I've ever read.
I finished it like a month ago, right? But
I forced my family to read it. I got I got it the hard copy. I got the Kindle so my daughters could read it. I got the audiobook so that they could listen in the car.
right, but that's the fundamental problem is with I should have had a deal by now. That's the
Exactly.
gap, as opposed to the gain of like all these skill sets that you picked up when you might not have even been in real estate before then. Like I wasn't. Like I thought I had to have a certain amount of deals done by a certain point, and then I realized I was like, wait a minute, dude, you literally you joined sub two and got into real estate at that point 10 months
Right.
ago now.
Yeah.
Like that's not a lot of time to acquire the amount of skills that you've acquired.
Whatever. You just one of the things that so the book is called The Gap and the Gain. So one of the things they talk about in the book is like taking chunks and going backwards, right?
Yep.
And so like if I go back 2 years, this would have been unimaginable that I would have been where I am now.
Yep.
I couldn't even have imagined that I would be able to do the things that I learned over this period of time, right? And so, um, but you know, a lot of my deals weren't great, right? And I screwed a lot of things up, yeah. And you know, and so I could look at that and be like, oh man, but I missed this and I missed that. And I should have gotten into this, I got into this in whatever the end of 2022, which is quite possibly the worst time to get into real estate investing, right? Where, you know what I mean? Whereas like it's funny, like everybody who invested in 2020 in 2018 is a genius, right? Because it's literally impossible to fail when you have record low interest rates and record high appreciation.
Right.
You could buy the worst deal and overpay and get the worst like everything, and then you're
Hmm.
like, and I screwed it everything up and it's a money pit. Oh, but it appreciated 30%, so I'll just sell it on a profit, you know. Like right, you know what I mean? Oh, I'll just do Airbnb. Oh yeah, I'll make 500 bucks a day, right? And this is great, right? But I joined in the end of 2022. I got into investing, and then it's like, oh, interest rates are whatever 10% DSCR ones, and values are way so high. And how do you figure this out? And so, and I could have been like, oh, I should have done this. I should have done it earlier. Blah 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 blah. But this is where I am. You know what I mean? And hopefully, after if it's going to be interesting to see. I'm hoping that in the next 2 years or so, after the last couple years, you'll see the people who survived or thrived in the difficult times are going to be very well placed. Like I'm already seeing it. Like if the when the rates come down, I'm like, oh my gosh, more possibilities are going to be open now,
Yep.
right? Now I can actually do DSCR straight up, right? And I can, you know, maybe I can start from the beginning and not find a PML, and then I can refinance them out. And it's going to be something that's possible. And then the rates are going to be low enough that I can, do all these more. I have many more options, and it's going to be much easier. But it's only because I developed those muscles. I was running it out in high altitude from the beginning. You know what I mean? And so hopefully it'll get a little easier when everything comes down. Um, but I think the mindset is just has to be that look where you've come, even if it's just like a month ago, I didn't maybe just joined sub two. A month ago, I didn't even know what a HUD one was. I didn't even know, right, what a real estate transaction looked like. And now I understand all these
Yeah.
terms, and now I can have a conversation. That's something, right? You now
Yeah.
know more about real estate. Even if you never invest, if you buy your own house, you already are now better off than 99% of the population in terms of your knowledge.
Yep. And kind of like we were saying earlier, like there's plenty of people that don't want to do it, but you have to still do it scared, you know?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's understanding that you look back, you realize the skills that you've acquired, you realize how far you've gotten. Like even doing a podcast, you only have to make it past 20 episodes, and you're in like the top 1 or 2%.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. There's
And
plenty of times I didn't want to do
yeah.
it.
And that's like one of the things we've been offering. And if people listen to this, is that one of the things we'll do is we're doing equity partnerships for people who have that fear and want someone to hold their hand. So
Yeah.
if someone wants to in exchange for giving up the equity, they bring the capital for the entry fee, we'll hold their hand and walk through everything. Right? They'll learn every step of the process. And if they want to do
Yeah.
PML, then we can refinance them out and they can go take that money and do it on their own. Now they feel a little more comfortable with it. And if not, they can stay in as they want equity, they can stay in the deal, whatever, That's this house in Denver, she's more experience dealing with co-living now.
Yeah.
So that's a good way you can partner with people. People are joining teams, people are doing a lot of things to get over that. But
Yeah, it's just getting in front of deals and, just talking to people about it and just asking. Like my favorite question to ask people is, okay, well, if this isn't the deal for you, what would make it the deal for you? Because like we
right,
said, there's a lot of flexibility in how you structure things and how to make things work. And you just never know. Like I said,
right,
I didn't think in 3 or 4 months in the sub two we'd be looking at raising capital for multifamilies and land development, but we did,
right. Yeah.
you just never know.
My grandmother used to say, man plans and God laughs.
Yep.
So, so yeah. So yeah, right. You have to have goals. You have to have a plan, but you should write it in pencil.
Yeah, I think so. Because, like you said, you just always have to be willing to kind of shift and pivot a little bit, and that's part of the journey.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's the beauty of being in business, though, too, is that it weeds out those that aren't meant for it pretty quickly. Like you were saying, it's super easy when everything is ideal and perfect, and you
Right,
walk outside and it's 72 degrees, but nobody's doing their workouts in the rain. I've
right.
done them. And
Yeah,
if anything, those are the best workouts because that's where you realize you're like, dude, nobody else is doing this.
for sure,
Like, no,
for
it's like
sure.
that analogy of they talk about the two people that would always go back and forth, right? Cutting a tree. And the one dude would he would take an hour break here, an hour break there, and the other guy would just swing and swing and swing. And finally he asked the guy, he's like, where do you go for that hour? He's like, oh, well, I go when I sharpen my axe, right? There are a lot of people that are banging their heads against the wall trying to force something to work when they should be looking at honing their skills.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So I'm glad that I'm glad that you take that approach. I'm glad that you definitely, like I said, you read The Gap in the Game. Are there any other books that you recommend people that are getting started?
I like the book. I'm reading, again, I'm reading it again. I like reading a lot. For me, it helps me fall asleep at night. I spend, I like to read nonfiction and it helps me. Um, so if you take 10 or 15, 20 minutes before bed, um, I'm reading now the book Who Not How, which is amazing.
Mhm.
Um, that book was really impactful for me also.
Same author, by the way,
Yeah,
Dan
yeah. Those
Sullivan.
guys, it's Dan Sullivan, Ben Hardy. I'm gonna just buy everything they write because I will, because they just seem to like have it, have it going on. Um,
Yeah, they are super good dudes. Right now I'm on Buy Then Build, which is more about business acquisition.
I have to be careful though, because
Million.
if I read some of these too like the real estate or the business book, sometimes it gets me too excited, I can't fall asleep. Like I want to do that,
Mm,
yeah.
you start thinking about money and you're like, oh, I can make some.
Yeah, yeah. Or I just think like, oh, I gotta fix it. Yeah. So sometimes I have to think about something like totally.
Something more innocuous.
Yeah.
Yeah, The Four Agreements is a really good one too, and so is The Compound Effect. Those are both books I recommend to everybody just kind of starting out on these journeys.
Right. 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 For
Super
sure.
small, super short, to the point, um, and not expensive books either.
Well, just go on eBay. Like
Yeah,
you can get them. Like get a beat up used copy. Who cares? The words are the same.
that's true.
Yeah.
As long as it's not missing pages, you're good.
Yeah. I think also an important book that everybody should read is called "Start with Why" by Simon Sinek.
Ooh, I love that one.
I think that's like a life book.
Hmm.
He also writes The Infinite Game. I think that's also a good book. Um, and so I think those are good books to like help you focus your like life.
So talk to us a little bit about your 10-year plan. You said you have one. You said you're looking to acquire more properties over that. What does that kind of look like for you?
So in 10 years, my youngest is 9. So he'll be like graduating from high school. I want to be able to um, go and spend time elsewhere. I don't know where. And I want to be able to at that point decide that I'm going to cut back to like, maybe 1 week a month in the regular job and So my goal is to have enough properties by that time that I can, make all these things happen. And then maybe one of the kids wants to get in this and take it and make it bigger. I don't know. That's my ultimate
Yeah.
goal. I want to be able to give, $100,000 a year to charity. I want to, be able to, I have like ideas about other things I want to do. Like I want to build an online sort of tobacco cessation program to help people quit smoking. Um, so there's a lot of things I want to do that right now I can't do for a couple of reasons. One, because I work too much, and two, because they cost money, or because mostly the time thing. So I want to be able to just sort of be able to work when I want.
Yeah, and have that cash flow that you could be supported not only, for yourself, your family, your life, but also
Yeah,
kind of help support those dreams that you have.
for sure. If my kids want to do something like that, maybe doesn't make a lot of money, I want them to be able to do that and not be stressed.
I think that's my favorite part about the charity goal is that you really have to elevate your goals significantly because, like, I don't know what your cost of living is, but if it's, you
I
know,
got 5 kids, man.
fi-
It's
right.
a lot.
So it could, yeah, 5 kids,
And
that's
like
a lot. That's
I found this out early on. You have to feed them every day, right? Like you can't skip a few days to save money. It's frowned upon, right? They need
yeah.
new clothes. Like they grow, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't skip out on shampoo or body
No, they
wash or
want
toothpaste or
things.
any
They
of
have
that
to
stuff
buy
either.
things.
Yeah,
So and they have
but
me as a
that's what I'm
father, so
saying.
you need therapy too. Like I gotta, save up for that.
Right. But that's my point. Like if it costs you 10 grand to support your household every month, which for some places that's very modest and some places that's a little bit high, but
It depends on your housing costs usually.
right. But let's just say that that is what it takes. Like you probably need to 2 or 3x that in order to hit the charity goal.
For sure. Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I like to give away 10%, so I would want to make $1 million a year.
Yeah.
So
So that's why I like because it elevates your goals that much more. And I always think that's what a lot of people do wrong in goal setting is they don't set their goals high enough. So then when they either get close or if they don't achieve it at all, it's like, bro, if you want to make 300 grand a year, set out to make a million. Because guess what? If you get to 150 or 200 or 250, you're gonna be way happier
yeah,
because
you
you
get to
got
150,
a
you'll
lot
be fine.
close.
You're not gonna be like, oh crap. Right. I mean, you
Right.
might. Some people are like that, but like the other thing is that I think it's important, but there's two factors. I think it's important that you want to set that goal of 300 or a million a year, but then you have to peel that back and say, what am I doing today? I need to get from that $1 million a year goal to I got to get up in the morning and do something.
Yep. And reverse engineer and work towards every day.
Exactly. Right. So I need to, so I figure I gotta have, a certain X number of houses cash flowing X number amount. Right. And so
Right.
then that's the number you got to get to and say, so I got to get this many a year. So that means I got to find a way to get this many a month. And that means I need to, and I know that I can figure those numbers out. I know that you know, I need to get 200 deals in my inbox a week or a month or whatever it is to get 5 potential deals that are good, of which I can close on 2 a month or whatever. And that's 24 a year, like whatever it is.
Yeah. Those numbers are going to be different for everybody, but in
Whatever, yeah, you
general,
can
that's
find
fine.
out whatever. But the key is then, okay, so then what do I have to do today to get the next one? Because in reality, I have the goal, but I can only focus on the next one right now,
Yeah.
right? And then I got to
Yeah.
do like assessments and say, okay, so I'm getting 200 deals in the inbox. I need it to be 400. So now I got to find ways to get it to 400.
Yeah.
I
And
need
I
to
will
speak
say
with I
in
need to speak
general,
with 20 people a week or something. I need to find a way to speak with more lenders. I need to do all these things.
if you don't know where to start, usually the 10-3-1 numbers work really well. I picked that up from sales, right? You need to have like 10 conversations to have 3 qualified leads to get one close.
Yeah.
So if you have absolutely no idea where to start there. And then as you start to get the real-time data, then you can refine. Because like you said, it might take you 400 deals in your inbox to get one good one. You never
Right.
know. But hopefully the better you get and the more resourceful you get, the more you can tweak those numbers, you can decrease the top of the funnel and increase the bottom of the funnel.
Well, it's always easier to decrease the top of the funnel, right? That's always
Yeah.
easy if you're able to, right? That's not a problem. doing less work is always easier, right? So if
That's
you're more
true.
successful than you anticipated, you can always do less. That's not a problem. I'm happy to do less if it works more efficiently than I thought, you know?
Right. But I think the best way to decrease the top of the funnel is by increasing that skill set, right? If it takes you an hour to underwrite one property, you can get that down to 15 minutes. Guess what?
Right,
That's a huge, huge upside.
right, right, for sure.
It's not always about doing less. It's usually about being more
That's
efficient
what I
and
mean. Yeah,
time
doing
blocking a
less,
little
but being more
better.
efficient to me is also doing less, right? It's your output's the same, but your input's less.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man. So I guess let me ask you this, because you with five kids, what do you want to be remembered for? Like what kind of legacy do you want to leave with those all those little chitlins?
I mean, the children are the legacy, I think.
I think I can
I mean, I
agree
think
with
like the
that.
type of people that they become, which so far I'm killing it with that because they're unbelievable children. Although I totally riding on the coattails of my wife, who was really the reason they're so amazing because she's also amazing.
Yeah.
I just financed the operation, but I get full credit, right? But I think that
Yeah.
that I think that is a legacy. I think that that's what is valuable. You know what I mean? In reality, like nothing that we do, you could make billions of dollars, you'll be forgotten in 100 years. It doesn't matter. And even if you're remembered, like, oh, great, we remember Andrew Carnegie, but like, so what? Like nobody's like, right? So what? You know?
Yeah.
Wait, who's that guy? Oh, that's the guy. I don't know, like whatever, right? Rockefeller. They have the center in New York named after him, right? Like, so I think that in reality, it's like you have to sort of live in the moment and then find something that gets you excited, that makes a difference in the world. You have to impact other people. And I think if you do those things, then you can find a life of meaning doing just about anything.
And what kind of charity are you looking to donate to? Because I know that's got to be a big cause for you to want to donate 100K a year.
Well, it doesn't have to be what I mean. Like, I think
Yeah.
that I like the idea of doing things that inspire people to find meaning in their life, in different ways, in helping people get educated, helping people find meaning. I think that's an important thing, especially nowadays, um, where the sort of the social media onslaught is really it's all saccharine. You know what I mean? It's all sweet and low, right? You think you're
Yeah.
getting nutrition, but at the end of the day, like it's just empty. It's empty calories. Like you're not really getting anything out of it. And I think people, if you ever had the experience, like you scroll through the social media for an hour, the way you feel afterwards is like, ugh, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot of people who are really struggling to find meaning and purpose. And I think that would be something that would be really to help people with that. I think is something that would create a ripple effect that would affect all kinds of other things. You know what I mean? When people see meaning in their life, they're kinder and they're more successful, and then they can give to others, and then they can feel better. You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah. So is there a particular avenue you see that going down? You mentioned like possibly that stopping smoking.
Oh, that's a sort of like a combo business thing I want to do. Like, um, that would be like a business that also impacts people. I think that kind of win-win business is exciting to invest in.
Because for us, like you brought up Hurricane Katrina earlier, like I try to do a lot of stuff with disaster relief. Like anytime
Right.
somebody
Yeah.
needs a hand, whatever, we send
Right.
labor, we send materials, we send people,
Sure.
whatever we have, or food insecurity is another big one.
Yeah, for
There's a lot of
sure.
that
It's
down
all
here.
good. By the way, it's all good.
Oh yeah. I'm just curious if there was any one of those that struck you particularly that like inspired Dan.
No, what I like to be able to do is when something when something happens, like I guess it's kind of thing with everybody else. I like the flexibility to say, like you said, if there's a big hurricane or whatever, like I want to be
Yeah.
able to say, okay, that's what's needed right now. You know what I mean? If there's this, like, okay, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. Like, you know, setting people up in business, I think is really a great thing too. Um, You know what I mean? I always say like you teach a man to fish, he eats for a day. No, sorry, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. But even better is teach a man how to invest in a fishing boat and lease it out to other fishermen. Right? That's the
Yeah.
best. They always leave that one out. You know what I mean? Like, right? You know what I mean? Have the
Yeah.
man build a fishing business where he licensed multiple fishing ships to multiple people, and then he provides fish for life for all these people, and then for himself,
Yeah, I like how you take that flexible approach too, because it reminds me of, have you heard that parable of like the Harvard business student that goes down to Mexico and he tries to convince the Mexican fisherman to go commercial. Have you heard that one?
No.
So in summary, this there's a Harvard business student. He goes to Mexico for vacation, and he comes across this Mexican fisherman who he takes his little boat. He goes out
Right.
during the day and he fishes and he catches fish and he comes back. He plays guitar during the day. He takes a siesta, and the guy observes the fisherman for like a week or two, like doing this. And one day he goes to him and he's like, "Man, why don't you do all these things?" And he lays out like a 30-year long business plan of how he could start a commercial fishing operation. He could have an IPO. He could sell. And I guess kind of the moral of the story or the crux of it is the fisherman asked him, "Well, what would I do after that?" He goes, "Well, you could spend time with your family, you could take siestas, and you could play guitar."
I think that that's one of the everybody talks about the American dream, which I'm all for, but I think it's a little bit of an illusion too. Is that this the American dream is that you can come from nothing and become wealthy. That's true. I think that dream exists. The
Yeah.
illusion is that then you'll be happy.
Yeah.
I think if you travel around the world, I think there are people in living conditions that are worse than you can imagine, and they are happier than you.
Yep.
And so, right, there's a country called Bhutan, Bhutan. Bhutan. It's like I think it's
Hmm.
just south of Mongolia in Central Asia. And their king, they had a king who actually abdicated because he's like he didn't think that it was a good that there should be a king. He thought it should be a democracy. Like when has that ever happened? Um,
Hmm.
they decided that they're not in the 70s. They decided that they're not going to measure gross national product. They're not going to measure economic output as the marker of their society. They created something called the gross national happiness. And they
Hmm.
send a survey out every 2 years or twice a year. I can't remember what it is, but they periodically send out a survey which people like check off their happiness scores or whatever. And then they will direct all of their government spending and policy to improve that number. And they do these surveys in countries all over the world. What are the happiest countries? And it's like in terms of economy, it's like 130 something out of whatever 180, but happiness is
Hmm.
usually in the top five.
And that's one
And
of the things
so
I
and
like
so and
that
there's a
they.
there's a lot of reasons why they are happier than everyone else. So I think that it is vitally important for anybody who's trying to achieve some level of wealth is that do not think that when you achieve that level of wealth, it's going to mean you're going to be happy.
No,
It's
more
not.
money,
And
more
so, I
problems.
mean, it may be wealth and money is a means, it's not an end.
Hmm.
And so it's good to have that wealth. So it's a means for you to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish.
That's one of the things I really like that he opened the gap in the game with was to talk about the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
Like, I've always liked that line from I think it's the end of Ulysses where they say to seek, to strive, to find, and not to yield. Right? Like you should always want to be better. However, the pursuit of happiness is not like you're never going to catch happiness. You have to create happiness.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. And I think that happiness comes in giving to others. It comes in building something meaningful. It comes in I think there's a lot of even science about this is that your happiness comes primarily from a sense of meaning in your life, and it comes through your relationships, comes from health. And
Yep.
so mind, body, and soul. So if you're so I think that's part of the problem. I think when people are so unhappy is because they think that if they achieve this some sort of arbitrary number of wealth, that then they'll be happy. And then what they're doing is they're then going on movies, television, social media, and they're constantly seeing people who are beyond that. I mean,
And
I
the
remember
goalpost
this
always
really hit home
moves.
for me. So my aunt is she has a successful business, and her business is she takes care of transporting very expensive cars, like multi-million-dollar cars for
Hmm.
billionaires. So her job is dealing with customs and the transportation and the trucks and the boats and all that stuff.
Hmm.
She took me to the airport. I was in Los Angeles where she lives, and we went to the airport, and she's like, "Oh, you want to see a shipment of cars?" And I was like, "Sweet,
Hmm.
yeah, let's see." Right. And so she took me to the whatever the area was where the cars, she was just checking them out, making sure everything was working. And she showed me this car by somebody named Pagani, right?
Yeah.
This car at the time was like $1.5 million. It looked like a spaceship. I was afraid to touch it with my fingernails might scratch it. Like I was nervous just being near it. I like, what if it was like, so this like, it was a piece of art. It wasn't an automobile. And I was
No, a
just like,
single bolt on a
wow.
Pagani can cost as much as a Porsche.
Huh?
That's how a single bolt on a Pagani can cost
Yeah,
as much as a
probably.
Porsche. That's how.
Yeah, for sure. And so then I turned around behind me, and on another one of their sort of carriers was a Ferrari,
Mhm.
this beautiful yellow Ferrari that was worth like $500,000. And I was like, it's like a Camry, like because in comparison, it's like a Camry.
Yeah.
You just ruined cars for me because there's never, thank God, because like there will never be a car cool enough. It's not like, oh, if I have this car, then I'll be okay. There's always somebody that has a better car. There's always somebody that makes more money. There's always somebody who has a bigger house. There's always somebody who's better looking or stronger or smarter or whatever. There's always somebody who's better. And so if you're constantly looking at, and then if you're comparing yourself constantly to all these people, then you're never going to be happy because you're never going to get there because there's no there. It's always the goalposts are constantly moving, right? But if you only try to be better than you were, right? It's like I'm going to be better than I was a year ago, and if that's your guidepost, right? And anybody on the social media, like we all do this, like nobody's putting like I always feel like you should be obligated by Instagram to have your whatever your picture that's your identifying picture must be taken when you wake up immediately in the morning. Like that should be a law, right? Like it should be like you roll out of bed, somebody takes a picture of you at that moment, and that is your profile picture.
Can we at least make it after coffee?
No, it's got to be real. So that then every other picture you put, right? We know,
So
right? If
there's
everybody was
filters
forced to
and
do that, like it's
makeup
like okay,
and
because we're
yeah.
all we're all using the filters, and now like I have this thing called CapCut for videos. Like it'll make me look younger.
Yeah.
It can make my teeth whiter. Like freaks me out. I don't
Hmm.
like it. Like it's too weird. Right? And so,
Well,
but you're constantly comparing yourself to something which is not real, right? And 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 so not only are you not comparing yourself to something which you could achieve, it's not even real.
well, I'm glad you brought up the cars though, because like I grew up an avid car enthusiast. Like when
Right.
I was young was when Top Gear came out. And that's when,
Okay.
that just ended recently. But all three of the co-hosts that started Top Gear that moved on to Grand Tour, they retired. And I watched the finale of it last week. And one of the things I think I picked up from them was like a lot of some of the most fun that they had driving cars was not when they were driving the super, super expensive cars. It was when they were driving the shit boxes across like some of the most dangerous parts of the world, doing the wildest things. And I look at it like that too. Like you said, you have a Hyundai. Like I've got an old truck,
Right.
and my old truck is loud, it's slow, it doesn't do a lot, but you know
That's
what?
why
It is.
I love Turo. That because then you can like drive one of those cars. Like I always like to rent a convertible. Although I might buy a convertible because that was like the most fun. It doesn't have to be a good expensive car. Like you could find a used convertible. So fun.
Yes. So you can have your hair blowing in the wind.
Well, yeah, what's left of it, right? Yeah, my scalp blowing in the wind. Yeah,
Yeah. But like I said, the truck is not fast. Like by no measure should it fill my tank with as much happiness as it does. But it is my favorite thing in the world to drive because it's something. There's something
right.
about it that makes it fun and enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, so and like that's why I always think it's better like if I was a billionaire, I'd much rather have a like a like a redone like old car. I don't know, because that
Yep.
has personality and that's unique and stuff like that. But you know, whatever. Sports cars don't impress me. They're hard to sit in.
Right.
They're like really low. Like it's like I don't know.
Well, in the older cars, you have that more connection to it. It's like you said, it's a more visceral feeling. It's an
Yeah, I miss.
experience.
I always drove a manual transmission. I miss that like feeling
I
of
do
a.
now.
Yeah, yeah. It's harder to find. You can't find them anymore. Also,
I
my
do
wife
now,
won't let
but
me. She's like, I don't want to learn. I'm like, okay, fine. One day maybe.
my truck is 24 years old. It'll be 25. Like like I said, it's loud. My buddy got into it yesterday when we went to go look at the park, and he was like, "What's that loud ticking sound?" I was like, "You mean the idle?" Like that's just what it
That's its
sounds like.
soul.
It
That's
is.
its soul singing.
But he drives a Tesla, so I can make fun of him all I want.
Tesla, the electric
Dude,
cars are fun. They really go fast.
yeah. But that's the thing too, and like that's one of the things that they used to say on Top Gear. It's not about how fast the car goes; it's how fast you drive the car. Like it's how
Well, there's
much
something
fun
cool
you
about those
have
like
in the car.
instant torque electric cars where you like you don't have to drive it fast because you can go 0 to 30 in like a second and a half. You're like, ooh, like even just just going 40 miles an hour, you're like,
Yeah, but my thing with the EVs is I feel like it's the same level of novelty that you see in the social media. Is it's like this is super cool, it's super novel, it's got all this fancy tech, and then once you get adjusted to it, you're just like, I mean, it's whatever.
yeah, it's like anything else, like whatever. You get
Where
used to everything.
whereas there's always an experience to driving a manual, driving that's a little bit louder, a little bit more
Yeah,
visceral, a little bit more fun, you know?
yeah, for sure. Everybody's got the thing that gets them going.
Cool, man. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour here, so I wanted to kind of ask you if you got any final thoughts here and things that you'd want to that you would start tell new investors that watch this.
Um, yeah, I think that the important thing is feel the fear and do it anyways, right? I think consistency over velocity is important, right? It's I see this a lot. I deal with a lot of people with weight loss. I when people do these fad diets or whatever they're doing, they lose a bunch of weight.
Hmm.
I just like I'm like it's not gonna work. I've seen this 1,000 times. When people are like, I'm just gonna do one thing every day and commit to it. Oh, by the way, the other book you have to get everybody is called Atomic Habits. One of the greatest
Yep,
books to make your life better. Um,
second that.
yeah, and so consistency over velocity. Don't compare yourself to anyone else than anyone other than you from 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and 2 years ago. That's the only thing that matters. Whether it's talking about your job, your income, your exercise, whatever it is, right? And your goal should be constantly to do a little bit better than you were before, to gain knowledge, to make yourself a little bit stronger, a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser. I think that if you do that and have a long time horizon, then I think what happens is some people they chase after the quick things, and then it's the then 2 years of that they have nothing to show for it. Where somebody who was doing a little bit every day is a different person after 2 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
and I think the other biggest takeaway that I had from you coming on was that volume solves most problems.
yeah, volume and time. Yeah, I really think volume and time solve a lot of problems. Patience, you'll usually wait it out, like a lot of things, and then just keep at it. Consistency, volume, like this is it doesn't sell because it's not exciting and flashy, and nobody wants to know that, oh, I have to get up every day and do this. But like, just the faster that you just come to grips with that's the truth, the faster you will start on the road to success. You know what I mean? And I think that that's just life. I mean, I'm starting to sound like an old man, but I'm almost, I'm getting there, right? So that's just everything that I have in my life that has been a slow day after day. I learned something very interesting. Most people are committing to something and they create a commitment, but they're not actually creating a commitment. They're creating an expectation. So somebody says, I'm committing to buying 5 houses in the next year. They're not committing, they're expecting. They're expecting they're going to buy 5 houses in the next year. And what happens is then at the end of the year, they are either a success or a failure. And they're
Hmm.
done. That's it. They're either a success or they're a failure, and there's nowhere to go. Whereas, and that's an expectation. A commitment is characterized by a series of ups and downs, successes and failures. Okay.
Yep.
And so when you have a commitment that you don't achieve, what you're left with is not a success or a failure. You're just left with the next day. You got to get back on your commitment. So if you're
Right. You're
committed
left with a
to having
promise to yourself.
five houses in a year, if at the end of the year you have ups and downs, good days and bad days, it's fine. At the end of 5 years, you can get there. So you recommit, and the next day you get back on it, right? You know what I mean? If you're trying to lose weight, you can exercise 5 days a week, and this week you only exercise three. Fine, next you didn't fail. I always tell my patients, not when they try to lose weight, don't pick a number on the scale. Don't try to lose 30
Hmm.
pounds because you'll either get there and quit or you won't get there and quit. Your goal
Yep.
is not to lose 30 pounds. Your goal is to do something every day.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, y'all know how we do. We do these usually every Sunday. This was a special episode because Dan had a little bit of a travel delay on
Oh yeah,
Sunday,
I'm
but
sorry. Yeah, you can all blame Southwest Airlines. Oh my goodness. That's another thing. Maybe one day, like there are a couple things. Like if I was ever a billionaire, I would never want fancy cars, and I would never want. But like the private jet thing, I get.
yeah, I
I get
not
it.
going through
Like,
TSA, I understand too.
or whatever. Like jeez, or at least the first class. I don't know, but like to have it so that your whole day can be. It was fine though. Like there was football on, so if it was on a Monday, it would have been really I would have been really cranky. But there's football on. I'm whatever. I'm sitting. I was doing work, whatever. But I had to
So
mess up the podcast. I'm really sorry about that.
y'all know how we do. We normally do these every Sunday, 4 to 6 Central. Yeah, come and join us. You're always welcome to come ask the host or co-host questions. Um, and we only ask one thing, and that's if we brought you value, if we made you think, if we made you laugh, if we made you smile, that you come back and you tell a friend, bring somebody. So until next time, guys, everybody have a good week, and I will see y'all this Sunday with Doran.